We all have goals in life, and I have given myself one that is quite large. So I have quite a hefty fantasy TBR list, but we all need to dream big, right? First book on my TBR is Crescent City, House of Sky and Breath. I have already read House of Earth and Blood, which I loved, and it made me very emotional. I need to know what happens next. I love the world building that Sarah has created in these. This is extreme high fantasy, and it's so fun. And she always does such a great job of putting emotional arcs in her story and showing real humanity in her fantasy. But also, I want to learn more about world building because I love the way that she does it and how she immerses it in character development, where something happens at the end and you're like, I just thought that was like a nice little detail through a character moment. No, it all has purpose. And I think that's really important to note, because sometimes you can be reading something and it's just sort of being given to you, but you're not getting anything from it. And so I think it's really smart to actually have character development in also your world building, and it makes the reader feel more attached to it. These are going to be rereads, The Hobbit and all of the Lord of the Rings. I first read these books, I started, I think, like in high school, and because I hadn't read like a ton of high fantasy, it took me a while. I think I finally finished Return of the King almost 7 years ago, and one of my friends really wants to read this series. It'll be her first time. We're going to do a buddy read of them. I am so excited to return to the series. This is what made me fall in love with fantasy. Tolkien just really introduced me to how far you can go with world building, and also just creating a story about good versus evil and fighting for that good when everything seems against you and it's absolutely impossible, but that is the whole point. We always have to fight for just that little bit of good in the world, which is why I love A Court of Wings and Ruin so much in the 8 Guitar series. Same message, it's wonderful. The Awakening by Nora Roberts. Wait a second, doesn't Nora normally write romance? Yes, she does, but she has a couple fantasy series, and my really good friend Paige, she loves Nora. She reads almost every book from Nora. She told me that I should read this and that I would love it, especially because I was just in Ireland, and this takes place in New York and Ireland, and there's dragons. This is about a character named Breen, and she discovers that her father essentially had a investment account in her name, and it's a lot of money. So she decides to go to Ireland to learn more about him, and he used to tell her of all these great stories when she was growing up, but while she's there in Ireland, she starts to unlock mysteries. There's apparently some sort of portal in Galway that takes her to a land of fairies and mermaids. Whew! I am excited. The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I actually got this in a giveaway on Instagram, which was really exciting. The person I won from, we actually were talking about this on her Bookstagram because she did a review, and I was like, that sounds so cool. And I put it on my Amazon wish list, and so this was what she chose off my list. The adopted human daughter of the Nightborn vampire king, Aurea, carved her place in the world designed to kill her, her only chance to become something more than prey is entering the Kajari, a legendary tournament held by the goddess of death itself. But winning won't be easy against the most vicious warriors from all 3 vampire houses. To survive, Aurea is forced to make an alliance with a mysterious rival. Everything about Rayhan is dangerous. He is a ruthless vampire, an efficient killer, an enemy of her father's crown, and her greatest competition. Yet, what terrifies Aurea most of all is that she finds herself oddly drawn to him. I just finished reading the Belles Trilogy recently, so I'm like, vampires. And if you're not a huge fan of spice in your books, my friend who recommended this, she is also not a huge fan of spice in her books. She loves romance books, but not with spice. That makes me think that there is limited or almost none spice in this, which is perfect then. Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I've seen the show. I love the show. And particularly what I want to learn about when I'm reading this book is I want to understand about writing politics. I think that's one of my favorite things I love about the show is all the scheming that's happening between the kingdoms and the decision making. Like, I want to dig into reading a fantasy book about politics now. I just think it's so fascinating. So I'm really excited for that. And also, I love watching adaptions and then reading the book or vice versa and seeing the differences and like why they chose for what they put on screen. I think it's really fun to think about that and tinker with it because it is such an interesting puzzle to solve for a TV writer about like what's important to put on screen, what's not. Just because something's interesting on the page doesn't mean it's going to be interesting on the screen. Another book turned TV show, Outlander. I actually watched, I think it was the first 2 episodes of Outlander during Thanksgiving with my mom because she is obsessed. And I know that Outlander's not like entirely fantasy, it's more fantasy sci-fi, but it feels like fantasy to me. It has time travel. That's kind of the only magical thing that I sort of know about it so far. But as I was watching the show, all I can imagine in my mind is like, I want to see how this room is described. I want to hear what the characters are feeling. And actors can do such like an amazing job, but sometimes there's just something really delicious about seeing how they feel on the page and hearing their most inner thoughts. And that's my brain now. But I also want to learn from another author who writes romance, especially when it's a big part of the plot. I'm so particular about my romance in books, especially because I personally just don't like straight romance books. I want like another plot going on. I also want my characters to have arcs completely separate from the romantic relationship. The big stack continues. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I read her book, An Enchantment of Ravens, last year for Thanksgiving, and I loved it. I did a video essay on it. You can check it out on my channel. I've heard this has like fun, dark academia vibes because it's set in a library. I'm really excited about that. Margaret's books are in the same universe essentially, but they're not connected. They're still standalones, which I think is really cool. All sorcerers are evil. Elizabeth has known that as long as she has known anything. Raised as a foundling in one of the Ostermer's great libraries, Elizabeth has grown up among maginal grimoires that rattle beneath iron chains, capable of transforming into grotesque monsters. When an act of sabotage releases the library's most dangerous grimoire, Elizabeth is accused of treason. With no one to turn to but her sworn enemy, the sorcerer Nathaniel Thorne, and his mysterious servant, she finds herself entangled in a centuries-old conspiracy. Not only could the great libraries go up in flames, but the world along with them. Little romance going on, but it's also about her and her plot and being accused of something she clearly didn't do. Assassin's Apprentice. I heard about this from, I think the YouTube channel is Vikings Library. I don't know much about it. It's by Robert Hobb. Vikings Library said this made him cry. I like reading books that make me cry. I'm curious to see if this will make me cry. It sounds really cool. I like that there's assassin training in it. I want to really understand fight scenes and how to write them in fantasy. It seems so complicated and complex, especially if you've never like fought yourself. The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This was also from a giveaway. Again, I was like, what is going on this year? It's been wonderful. I am so excited to read this. Everyone describes it as like a cozy fantasy. There is romance, and then found family trope. But also it sounds like there might be a little bit of realism in there. I think that's really interesting. So I like seeing other authors who do it where it feels like it could fit in our world. I am excited to read this, and so many people have said how amazing it is. V.E. Schwab's A Darker Side of Magic. I bought this like last year, you guys, like early. This mostly just needs to get read at this point, but I know a bunch of people are obsessed with V.E. Schwab. It takes place in London, so I think there's like some Victorian vibes. There's magicians that are involved. So their gray London doesn't have any magic. And then there's red London where life and magic is reversed, and white London, a city slowly being drained through magical war. And then once upon a time there was black London, but no one speaks of that now. Interesting. That's enough that I want to just continue going in blind. Dun dun dun. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Again, I think these were bought at the same time at a local bookstore. Asked them at the bookstore, what should I read? I want new standalone fantasy. So they have a nice little love story, but they're also rivals. And apparently their battle against each other and their love for each other is gonna have lots of consequences. And it's set in a circus, which is really cool. One of my friends on Bookstagram says this is one of her favorite authors, and she loves this book, and I've seen a lot of good reviews, so I am excited. Time's Convert by Deborah Harkness. I loved the All Souls trilogy, so I'm excited to dive into this. This is apparently from Matthew and Marcus's point of view, which is really interesting. It's basically when Matthew turns Marcus into a vampire. Says it in the jacket. I love Deborah. I think she's amazing. I love her world. I love her dark academia. I love her magical realism. I love the lore of her vampires. Reading this, especially because she has another book coming out about another character from the All Souls trilogy. So need to catch up with that. And then we have Throne of Glass series. You can watch my emergency book shopping book haul on these books, and you can see all the beautiful covers. I am going to amend what I said in that video. Apparently the first book is Throne of Glass. My friend told me to read Assassin's Blade first, which is all the novellas. So I'll be reading this one first and then reading Throne of Glass second. So it would be lovely if I could get through the first 4 by the end of the year. So we have Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Heir of Fire, and Crown of Midnight. Am I crazy? Yes. How many books do we have? we have 18, which I think is doable because last year I read 18 and I started my sort of book journey in April and I went at a much slower pace, and this year my goal is to read 36. So this is over half of that goal. Now I need to start reading if I'm going to reach my goal. In the comments, let me know down below if you have read any of these books, if you have a suggestion on which one I should read sooner than later, or if there's a fantasy one you think I need to add to the list, because I need more apparently. I will see you on the next video. Bye.